Okay, we're not going to talk about balloon on camera, though. All right. Let's talk about the changing American family, specifically women's roles. All right? As I said before, the family's becoming more defined in terms of roles because of industrialization. And where is work leaving and where's work going to? Leaving the home, going somewhere else, right? If you're a farmer, it's leaving the family farm and becoming a larger operation. Not all farms, many are family, but they're becoming, right, as specialization happens, farms are becoming bigger. Obviously in the factories. Women's roles are becoming more defined. And how they see each family member also becomes different. 10% of women are not getting married, don't want to get married. It's actually, for a while, there were more people not getting married 100 years ago than there were today. There was obvious social pressure to get married, but many women are rejecting that notion. Also, the family's changing, the family's changing in the sense of women, like we said, are getting married later or having smaller number of kids. But also, the arrangements of families are different. For almost all of eternity, how were men and wife put together? It was arranged, right? Arranged marriages were the norm. Arranged marriages obviously haven't been the norm in American history, but there has been a little bit more control. As time has gone on, there's been less control, and love arrangements are getting to be a bigger thing, right? Love in the family. For a long time, if you were a man and your wife died, you went and found another wife very quickly, right? It wasn't just because of love, it's because you needed this economically. Someone to take care of kids, someone to cook, someone to do these things. And this had to happen. And if you're a woman and your husband died, what did you need to do? You need to find a husband because you need some sorts of income. But now as time is moving on, the Second Great Awakening and the family structure is changing, women and men's relationships start to sort of redefine themselves, and love becomes a bigger part of this. And so this is when, the country went to hell. And we all started trying to love each other and love our spouse. It's ridiculous. And the way women are seeing kids begins to change. Instead of a more punitive type punishment, like more cruel punishments, you're actually seeing children be seen as children rather than children being seen as tiny little adults. Right? For a long, long time, children were seen as short adults. Keep your mouth shut, can be seen, but when you're young, you're expected to make adult decisions. But as time goes on and we start to see maybe a little bit more science in this and a little bit more compassion, children are seen as children for longer, which makes something like child labor even more brutal, right? Because we know these are just children who are now in these factories, and it becomes even more socially sort of hideous. And there's also this thing called the cult of domesticity. Is that out there? The cult of domesticity is going to come around since the structure is changing and women have these defined roles. Women become the cult of domesticity. And who read Friedan here? She uses the cult of domesticity in her analysis. The cult of domesticity is where women are worshipped in the home. That at women's place, she is the leader of. She's not the leader, but she's the moral center of the home. She's worshipped as her role in the home is sacred. A woman's position is mother.
Your door's just gone.
That's going to have this picture. I modified it a little bit.
Did you really do that? Did you want me to have the picture?
Yeah.
And you modified it?
Give him a little Hitler.
That's funny. /sad. So throwing off my game now. We got a little Hitler Vassar. He took Vassar's picture. There was a nice little picture, and he took a black marker right here, and she had a little Hitler mustache. Women's roles are to be celebrated in the home. This is where they get to exercise who they are. Now, once they leave the home, What's the difference?
They are nothing.
They don't have rights. Women are worshipped for what they do in the home, but not respected politically, socially, or economically outside of the home. Does this make sense? This is the cult of domesticity, and it's reinforced oftentimes by literature. Those of you who are reading Friedan, you see all the stuff in literature, like stories about women who try to go and work on their own, but in the end, something always happens, and they end up back at home where they're much happier, right? They're desperately longing for their children, and every day they go to work, and man, work is just so hard because all I do is miss my kids. So I'm going to tell that mean old boss, I'm staying at home. And that first day back with your kids, you're like, this is where I belong. Well, this also happened in the 1840s and 50s. You see the Ladies' Journal, is that what's on there? Ladies' Book. My grandmother used to have these, not Godey's Ladies' Book, or Godey's Ladies' Book, but there were these books that reinforce the cult of domesticity. So the books that women were often reading that were part of this were like, how to get out certain stains, right? Or how to make certain foods, and stories and journals that would reinforce a woman's position is in the home, which further separates a man and woman's position in social life. A man now is strong, and a man works outside the home. In the year 1300, men didn't really work outside the home, right? But now, when men are working outside the home, the more history you take, if you go into graduate level history, these things become gendered, right? Every word or every idea is gendered, masculine or feminine. Like, for instance, Queen Elizabeth. She saw herself as both man and woman. Why would she see herself as man and woman? Because she's powerful. She was arguably the most powerful human on the planet. And she often referred to herself in a masculine writing because power was associated with men. Does this make sense? So women are now being gendered through their words and through what they're reading to really get them to stay at home. Okay? So that's the change in the family, cult of domesticity, women's role. We'll come back to cult of domesticity in the 50s. Alright, now let's talk about Alec de Tocqueville. You guys could have read Democracy in America if you chose to. It's like 500 or 600 pages, and like I said, in the history of this class, I think I've only had 2 people who've ever read Democracy in America for this class. And Alec de Tocqueville, clearly, where's he from does it sound like?
Franceville.
Yes, Alex de Tocqueville, yes. He's from France. He comes over and he goes around America, observing American democracy and observing just Americans be Americans. What do you think he finds? We're talking about an educated French guy in the mid-19th century is going around the American frontier, the West, into cities. What's he finding?
What are these people doing?
No, this book wasn't, it was truthful from his regard. He wasn't trying to, like, a lot of it was very complimentary. What he found was, first and foremost, Americans are highly individualistic, rugged. Americans weren't necessarily artists. On the frontier, you're like, you know what? I need to work and clear this land. I need to build a house and really feed myself. Or I can write poetry. Right? Which one's probably going to happen? Poetry, right? Yes. I'm going to starve, but I'm going down writing verse. This kid handed me a paper, and I was like, is this he handed me the paper, and he didn't really know what he had done. I was like, is this in iambic pentameter like I asked? He went, yeah. And didn't know what it was. I had a student 2 years ago, Alex Isaac, Alex Isaac. He sat right there, and he did an outline in iambic pentameter. He did an entire AP outline and iambic pentameter. It was pretty great. I gave him extra credit. Alexis Corbin, her notes were great. Her notes were always really, really, very few words. It was mostly symbols and arrows. And they were really strange. And she knew what they meant. And she actually did an outline one time only in symbols and arrows. And it was like 3 pages. And she knew what they all meant. And I gave her extra credit for that one too. It was really funny.
You did not.
And I read Payton's a couple weeks ago.
It was great.
Slash
Offensive?
offensive, yes. Slash discriminatory. Oh dear. Glasses.
Slayer fix to get that. So that's going to get excited about education.
All right, well, you're on camera now.
Oh, sorry.
All right. All right, so we're rugged, we're individualistic. We see these things as compliments, right? In America, he's pointing out things that we still feel is important today. But there are other cultures that if you call them an individualistic, they see that as an insult. Why would it be an insult to be called individualistic? Chinese people would call being individualistic. Native Americans would also call it a different thing. They would call it selfish. That you care more about yourself than the group. In America, though, what de Tocqueville saw was we were aggressive, individualistic, and we were nationalistic. Today, what is the most popular pro sport in America today?
Football.
NFL. What is America's team?
Cowboy.
The Cowboys.
They're my
What are the
favorite.
Cowboys? What's a cowboy?
He's a
Individualistic, rugged, right? Nationalistic. In America, being called a cowboy is kind of a positive thing. Do you know the Soviet Union used to call Americans they didn't like or Americans they couldn't trust? You know what they called them? Cowboys. You couldn't trust them. They would go off on their own. They were unpredictable. This is what de Tocqueville was talking about. He said it's very democratic. He was struck with how democratic it was. Okay. And his book was called Democracy in America, and he saw that the most democratic part of America was on the frontier. This is where we're seeing people who are highly rugged, highly individualistic, tough. If you were a frontier person, you were tough.
Is that like that Alaskan Frontiers show?
I guess, I don't know. It sounds great.
They always talk about how tough they are and how you have to be.
If you have to talk about how tough you are, then you're probably not as tough as you think you are. Fred Cox, who was a good friend of mine who used to teach here and used to teach with Glass, Cox used to love to fight. And he used to always say, you see people who get in fights, like, boy, you do this again, I'm going to kick your butt. Cox always said, if somebody told you they were going to kick your butt, you were going to be just fine. Because people who are going to kick your butt, they don't tell you. It just happens. Alright, so now let's talk about Second Great Awakening artistic achievements, right? So for the Second Great Awakening, we've been talking about all these social movements, but there are also artistic achievements that are coming out of these social movements. One of them is going to be in architecture. Again, there's not a lot of people on the frontier in America who are like, you know what? I want to make my cabin A-frame because it's going to really hold the, it's going to hold the background beauty really in a great light. People didn't say that. They just built whatever they could do functionally. However,